All right, guys, I want to welcome you back to the Make or Break Show. We're hanging out with the one and only John Malecki, calling in from Pittsburgh. You're born and raised Pittsburgh, right? Like through and through.
Born and raised in a suburb of Pittsburgh
Okay.
called Murraysville. I was actually born in downtown Pittsburgh. But yeah, been here pretty much my whole life.
That's cool. I do. I've worked for a company before that puts on like 5K, 10K road races, and we did a race in Pittsburgh, like right down the river. It was actually right at the start was at the Steelers Stadium, and so that was my first time to Pittsburgh. I had no clue. Like I always saw like the steel and all that kind of stuff, but man, the downtown is so cool. It was. I loved being there.
Yeah, it's really like popping off right now. There's kind of like a renaissance of like youth life in downtown Pittsburgh.
Oh, really?
Typically, it's seen as like an industrial town.
Yeah.
And what we've got going on is, with all the young professionals coming out of Pitt and CMU and staying local, Google, Uber, and Apple have all built headquarters in Pittsburgh. So they're pulling a ton of young talent, and then they're actually keeping them around the city. So the city, which used to just be straight up business, now has a lot of culture to it, as far as like places you can go eat, shows, and some cool other hangout spots, nightlife, whatever. So yeah, so downtown Pittsburgh has kind of like got this resurgence going. And then the part you were talking about is actually called the North Shore, which is where the stadiums are at, which is also a nice, cool part of town that's like got some history to it and is starting to pop off a little bit too. So it's a cool place to be right now.
That's cool. Yeah, the is Carnegie Mellon, is it close to there?
Yeah, Carnegie
Okay.
Mellon's, it's 5 minutes from the University of Pittsburgh, so they're in like the same part of the city, which is it's not downtown, but it's right there. It's called Oakland, PA. It's
Gotcha.
yeah, it's about 5 minutes from downtown.
That's cool. So do you guys have you have like the self-driving cars? Is that
Yes.
right? Uber
Yeah.
self-driving cars or
They are Uber self-driving cars. They stick to one part of the city at the moment. It's called the Strip District. It's like near downtown. It's pretty much two streets, but they're pretty cool. You see them all the time. It's interesting because you read into like the testing of the self-driving cars and stuff, and a lot of the issues that come along with those cars is their systems based around the weather and whatever's going on in the atmosphere, and clouds mess it up a decent amount.
really? Okay.
And Pittsburgh is a typically extremely cloudy place. Like we get probably like 60 sunny days a year. So it was funny that they decided to do testing here, but it's going pretty well. We haven't had anything, I don't think, major accident wise happen.
Yeah. That's cool. I definitely want to get into your background. You are by far the most unique, I think, background of anyone we've had on the show. Which if people don't know your background, they'll soon learn why. But going way back, so was sports your main thing? Like, was there any making in you like growing up as a kid?
So Pittsburgh is a very like blue collar city, and with that, it's literally tons of immigrants. My mother's parents are straight off the boat from Italy. They came in. Grandfather worked a construction job. My father worked construction. His father was a police officer, so always had that blue collar background and mentality. Growing up, I was a bigger kid, and I was always free help. As most of us know, you're going to be subject to whatever your parents are doing, and if they need your assistance as a child, you're typically going to have to do it. So being a bigger kid, I was always helping out with something in the construction world, whether it was building a shed or they were remodeling the addition on the house, pouring concrete. We did tons of concrete. So much concrete. Grandfather loves concrete. And in that, I always had my hands dirty in something. My personal basis and emphasis was in sports, like loved sports, loved football, loved baseball. Those are two sports I played when I was really, really young. But I always, like, if I needed to make an extra buck, it was shovel a driveway or go build a retaining wall or mulch. I cut grass probably from when I was 12 to when I was a freshman in college to make extra money. So I was always doing something with my hands, kind of thing.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it, or was it more just out of necessity, or because you were there?
At the time, I didn't enjoy it, but I enjoyed making money. So I didn't really understand the concept of like the fulfillment of working with your hands.
Right.
So then it was kind of like a pain, but I did go out on my own in order to kind of do it. I had a friend of mine who him and I would hustle all around where we grew up and pick up side jobs to make a couple bucks. So, I mean, subconsciously, I guess I could say that I enjoyed it. I loved sports. Like I loved football and I loved baseball, but I didn't really understand how much I guess I enjoyed using my hands and working with my hands back then.
Gotcha. So on the football side of things, when did you first realize that you were pretty good at it?
Well, what's ironic is, how you used to do those like time capsules in elementary school where you'd like write to yourself in the future. So, and I think it was, I want to say like third, fourth grade, maybe somewhere around that point. Like right when I got started, I was pretty decent. Like you signed up for youth football. I worked my way into being a starter like immediately, and I was pretty much better than a lot of the guys out on the field. So I wrote one of those time capsules that I wanted to play in the NFL. Like that was my goal, that I had some great coaches. I remember drawing like a really crappy Green Bay Packers logo on this time capsule. And I wish I could find it now because that would be really cool. Yeah. But like I knew at a young age that I was pretty good at sports. Where I grew up, you get into sports like very, very young. I'm talking like, I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 years old. I didn't get into it till I want to say like 8. So whatever grade you're in at 8 years old, I don't have kids. Like right around 8, 9 years old, I realized that I was pretty decent. And that's when we did the time capsule thing, and I started making traveling teams, and I was, I was immediately integrated to the top level of the kids that I was playing with, even though I wasn't around for the first couple years of the rest of these kids playing. So I knew at a young age that like I was pretty good, and I really, really enjoyed it. Like, what's crazy is the same dudes that I grew up playing football with and baseball are still like my closest friends to this day. So that probably had something to do with it too. Yeah.
Were you bigger? Like what made you good, especially when you were young?
I was actually, so ironically, like as big as I am, I'm almost 6'3", probably weigh 275 pounds right now. I am tiny for football standards when it comes to being a lineman. So as a kid, I wasn't actually that big. I didn't really hit a growth spurt until I was a sophomore in high school. I was actually a safety when I got started playing. So if you know defense and football, that's like a wide receiver or the smallest person on the field for the most part. And then I worked my way from safety to linebacker to lineman as I got older.
So were you fast? Or I guess you were fast.
I mean, I wasn't fast. And as like, running circles around people, I was quick, and I just really loved to hit people. Like at a young age, you kind of like to base kids' performance in that sport around what they're actually good at, because that way you don't have to try to teach them new things. You just make them better at what they're already doing. So for me, like, I just wanted to go hit people. And like, I was just like trying to run around like a missile on the field. My one really good friend, he at a young age, very young age, like grew significantly. He was bigger, faster, stronger than everyone on the field, and he was an absolute freak. And from the first day I walked on the football field, him and I were just smashing heads together. This is like way before concussion protocol existed, and kids were, actually getting harmed and injured, sparks flying. I was seeing stars. Like you didn't have water. Like it was a different day and age, even 20 years ago. So yeah, that was how I made my way in sports, was just like enjoying it a lot more. And I really, really loved that whole physicality and aspect of football specifically.
So in high school, was there a point when you realized that like I can go on to college to do this? Or did you kind of know going in, even your freshman year, that's going to be a next step for you?
So I was a better player my freshman year. Like I knew I was one of the better players on the team. And I always like told myself like, it was called Division I back then. So like go D1, that was kind of like the dream every kid had. Right. So like I knew at a young age that it's what I wanted to do. Like I said, I wrote that capsule, however old I was. But with that, I started, to really focus and try to morph what I was doing into the future being based around football. And there was like 1 or 2 kids before me that went and played at the Division I university at my high school, and we were more focused like as a group on doing well. So me and the guys that I was growing up with really wanted to win badly. We won like everything playing baseball and football together before high school, and then getting to high school we wanted to like make sure that winning was an emphasis. So we all did everything together, and in that I I knew I was a little bit better than everyone out there. I didn't really realize it until I was a sophomore, and then I was the there was a when you're a sophomore, you go to the varsity team, right? There's a separate ninth grade and then varsity. So when I was a sophomore, I was the first kid to make varsity out of our age group, and it was the second day of training camp. So it was like the second day of football my sophomore year. And like that was something that was like a nod to me being, you know, like quote unquote the best player in our age group or our class. Now, I wasn't the most athletic, I wasn't the best athlete, I wasn't the best I guess all around football player, but I was really good at defensive line at the time, and that was kind of where I earned my stripes. So I knew I had a future in it. Did I know the significance of how far that would take me at the time? No, but I knew it was going to give me opportunity. And, my family isn't the most well off. So I knew I'd have an opportunity to go to college and have football get me there, whether that was a full scholarship or some type of assistance from football.
Yeah. And so you did get a full scholarship to Pitt. Is that right?
Yeah. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, fortunately, on a full scholarship.
Was that expected, or was that a surprise when like offers started coming your way?
It was a surprise for sure. I mean, after my junior year, I was getting nominated for all kinds of awards, and like my statistics compared to the rest of the kids in the WPIAL, in Western Pennsylvania, were top tier. Like, there wasn't really any defensive or offensive linemen that were doing much better than me. And with that comes accreditation. And so newspapers were calling, schools started coming around. So what happens in high school football, I think it's still the same, is that these scouts and stuff will come watch high school practices. They'll come watch players that are getting notoriety. And there was two guys that were older than me my junior year who were pretty decent, and the schools started to come to watch them. Well, they'd come to watch these other guys, and then they go to the coach, and the coach would be like, they'd be like, who's a 74? And they'd be like, you need to offer him now because he's going to be off the table. And these were like lower tier Division I schools. So those started coming in quick at the end of my junior year.
Okay.
I specifically remember being in the weight room training after my junior year, and my coach walks out into the hallway where we're doing like sit-ups or something. And he's like, hey, John, I got Pitt on the line right now. They want to talk to you. So this is how like casual conversation happened. So I'm like sweating profusely, super nervous. I hop on the phone. I talk to his name is Bob Junko. He's a great Pitt man. And we get on the line, and he's like, hey, John, Coach Botta's talking great about you. That was my head coach at the time. He's like, we want to get you down to the Pitt UConn basketball game. You and a couple friends and your dad, mom, whoever want to come. Let me know how many tickets. We'd love to meet you. And then we're going to offer you a scholarship. And I'm just like, like, yes, sir. Whatever. And like, I hang up the phone, and this is like the first real moment in college recruiting I ever had. So I don't know what's going on. And at that moment, it was kind of like, this is the level that I'm at, this is the level that I can be. Like I said, there was a couple players that were a little bit better than me when I was younger that were getting notoriety. But when I got to being, a sophomore to junior, I was better than they were as a graduating senior. And that's really when I started to realize, like, the standard is a top tier Division I program and in a full scholarship.
When you got that offer, did you know that's where you wanted to go, or did you kind of wait it out?
So I grew up a Pitt fan my entire life. My dad and mom are from the city, so they both grew up in like the golden age of Pitt athletics, the late 70s, early 80s, where Pitt was national championship contenders and winners and all this good stuff. And with that, I knew I always loved the University of Pittsburgh. Went to a ton of games when I was younger as well. So when that offer came in, we were ecstatic. It was actually ironic how it came in because it was so short notice. So from that phone call where I went to the basketball game, and Pitt was very good at the time, basketball too, which was awesome. So we go down to this game. My dad and I are having a blast. Some of those like childhood moments that you remember forever. We get to one of their blue chip recruiting days. And those are essentially their top tier recruits. They bring them to the facility, give them a tour, you go to the stadium, blah, 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 right? Trying to sell these kids on coming to Pitt. In one of the meetings where there's probably like 50 kids and their parents, right? My dad stands up, and the coach asks if there's any questions. And my dad's like, yeah, are you going to offer my son? And as embarrassing as that is, as a 16-year-old, the coach takes us in his office after and verbally offers me. And he's like, you know what, John, we actually have an offer on the table. It was going to come in the mail on Monday, but, we are going to offer you a full scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh. Congratulations. And I'm just like, what? And minds are blown. We're having, like this amazing moment. Mom's crying. Grant, she's full-blown Italian, like I said. So her phone calls out the door. Everyone's losing their minds. And it was an incredible moment. And I didn't commit at that time. I actually committed the following Saturday. But from there, offers and the word started getting around. The Western Pennsylvania football community is pretty tight knit. So when one kid's really good, every school knows about him. At least at the time. This was pre-YouTube and pre-internet, basically. Yeah. I mean, I VHS of me playing in high school at the time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So once you were at Pitt, you were voted, right, the captain of the football team. Is that how it works with captains in general?
Yeah. So I was that was probably one of the biggest nods to accrediting anything I've done with my life thus far. Yeah. Was being voted a captain by my peers while I was playing at Pitt my senior year. The process is essentially, coach hands out ballots. You write down 3 names for captain, and they go back and tally them up, and those are the captains. So to be thrown in the ring as one of the guys out of 140 that are on a team, that's something that I will cherish and hold with me for the rest of my life, for sure.
What do you think about you or your track record? Why do you think people voted for you?
So reflecting and looking at myself and, where I was then and where I am now, and who I am as a person and as a man, the character traits that I think got me to that point were essentially, work ethic and, just the will that I had to succeed. Being younger, you're great. You can be great because you're big. You can be great because you have more talent. But when you get to a level like that, a lot of the intangibles start coming in. And those things are going to be showing up early, learning the playbook, staying late, being on time, making sure your grades are good. And I was the guy that was teacher's pet, coach's favorite, check everything off the list. I will do anything in my power to capitalize on this moment for the benefit of the team. My sophomore year at Pitt, I played defense, and the coach brought me in his office, asked me to play offense, and I immediately jumped on it. No arguments, no questions asked, because I knew it was for the betterment of the team. So, things like that, things that I made sure that I held everyone around me accountable. Like I said, I was typically the first guy there, last one to leave. I knew the playbook inside and out. I was jumping down guys' throats if they were late or if they were making the team not look as good as they could. And I also performed pretty well on the field, being first team all conference, and as well as in the classroom, getting a business degree and being all academic teams and such. So I think just the broad spectrum of, what I was able to accomplish really helped me be seen by the team as somebody that we want to be, one of our leaders.
Yeah. So once you graduated, you said it was a bachelor's, is it in business administration? Is that right?
In marketing. Yeah.
In marketing. Okay. So was the NFL very on your radar, or how did you get into that world?
So I always emphasize the degree, getting my degree and graduating on time, which was something I'm very proud of. I was able to do. And in that, I knew that the NFL could be an opportunity. Everyone tries. Every senior at every university across the country tries to throw their hat in the ring for getting into the NFL. So I started getting, attention from agents coming out of college, and that process is another conversation. But with that, that's when that scouts are interested in you and looking at you. So, from there, I realized that that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I jumped into, making sure that I was taking care of everything I possibly could to be the best possible player I possibly could be after the season, my senior year. I did that during the season, but all the NFL, mumbo jumbo comes after the fact, as far as the combine type stuff, and you have a pro day at your university. And I wasn't invited to the combine But they did come to pro day at Pitt, and like I said, I was first team All Big East, and I was first team All East Coast, which was like pretty cool, and I was put on the radar for a lot of teams. I didn't make the combine, as I said, and I also didn't make an all-star game, which was interesting because those are two major things that a lot of agents see in young talent that's lower, that's not a first, second, or third round draft pick. They need these things to build their resume. So I knew I was on the radar, and I knew it was going to be a long shot. So I just like dove all in. We're in college, so I stopped going out. I was just focusing on class and training, and that was my focus until I knew that either I got onto a team for training camp or I didn't, and that's how I pursued it.
I was listening to an interview, I forget which podcast it was on, but you had mentioned that you had 13 cuts from 5 different teams.
Yeah.
So why did you keep coming back? I mean, because that's something I feel like, especially in your work now, you'll mention you've had something go wrong with the table or something.
Yeah.
You're like, whatever. I'm going to figure it out. What do you think about you just keeps that tenacity that keeps going after it?
I mean, I don't know. I think it might have been bred in me by my father, but I just have this relentless pursuit to not quit. I never want to be perceived as a quitter in any context of anything I do in my life. And there's good and bad to it. The good is what people usually see, but the bad is you might chase things for too long, or you might try to make things work that are just not right. And as you become older and wiser, that's where you kind of gain perspective into, what's good to be relentless toward and what isn't. At the time though, I didn't know any better. You have to realize that when I was chasing the NFL, I had been playing football since I was, like I said, 7 years old. Yeah. And I'm now 23. So my whole life, everything revolved around that sport. Yeah. I'm talking every good thing and every bad thing that ever came from anything I ever did was based around football. And that's really hard for a lot of people to grasp. It's because a lot of us have a lot more going on in their life, but literally that's all I did. I didn't care. Yeah, I cared about school, but I didn't really have a steady girlfriend. I didn't care about getting job experience. I didn't care about money. All I wanted to do was play football and be great at it. And so in that, every cut, I just looked at it and was this is the next step. This is the next, part of the process. If I just continue to put in the work, something is going to give, and something that I want out of the situation is going to work, or is going to happen. And that's kind of how I look at life. You can control only so many things and so many aspects and elements of what's happening around you. Your mindset, your work ethic, determination, all of that stuff is controllable. You can't control somebody else's influence. You can't control the weather. You can't control time, for instance. So I knew that I could only put in as much as I possibly could from the things that I could control. And that's kind of why I just continually just kept pursuing it up until that 13th cut. And that's kind of where I gained perspective and was like, why am I doing this? Yeah. I'm 20, I was 23 or 24 years old. And I took a step back and I looked and I was like, the reasons I always chased and loved football was because, as I said, when I was younger, I just literally loved it more than I did anything else in my life. I wanted to wake up every morning and smash my face into other human beings because I loved it. And I loved the process. And I loved the atmosphere. I love the people. I love the concept of football is something that is super addicting. At least to me personally, where you're able to contribute on a team scale in order to win for a big picture is something that I personally am drawn to. And with that, I just kept trying to get there and kept trying to be part of a great team or organization. And so now looking at it in my life, that's why I'm drawn to the people I'm drawn to in our space. That's why me and Brad and our podcast happened, was because I think Brad is one of the hardest workers and best makers in our community as far as it goes from an implementation and like execution standpoint. And I was drawn to that. I could see the amount of time and effort and work he was putting in. And I just kept pursuing and pursuing and pursuing until we were able to build a relationship as friends to turn it into something like Made for Profit and what we're doing now. And so the same thing around like small business in Pittsburgh. I've just like latched on and tried to build this like little bubble and hub of like creatives and people doing big things in business around the area to help me get better as a person. And that comes directly from, my wants and desires when I was playing football.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you wound up with the Steelers for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was actually, the Steelers are the team I was with the longest. It was basically 2.5 years I was with them.
Did you say you grew up a Packers fan though, back in 8th grade?
No, I grew up a Steelers fan. I have no idea why I liked the Packers in that instance. But yeah, no, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, like diehard black and gold.
What was that like putting on the uniform for the first time?
It is like I'm getting chills as we talk about it because it was one of the most fulfilling and humbling moments of my entire life. So what happened with Steelers was actually super unique, and because it's a podcast and we're pressed for time, I'll keep it short. But I was in training camp with Tampa Bay on Monday. I reported for the first day. I was walking to a meeting. They cut and released me. On the walk to that meeting, I went and packed my bags that I just unpacked. I flew home. I got home. Tuesday morning, my agent calls me. A guy walks off the field at Pittsburgh's practice, which I happen to be 22 miles from. I drive up there, sign a contract with them Tuesday afternoon, and I'm practicing with them Wednesday. So that Wednesday goes to Saturday where we're playing in a preseason game, and I walk in a locker room. My name's on the back of a black and gold Steelers jersey. And it was just one of the most incredible moments that I've ever experienced in my life. You idolize these guys growing up. And I was fortunate that I was so young that I got to play with some of the guys that I idolized in, Aaron Smith and Brett Kiesel and Casey Hampton and Troy Polamalu and Ben Roethlisberger and so many of these players that are idols in Pittsburgh and nationally, a lot of them too. But I walked into that locker room and I watched them for a decade. And I got to be on the same playing field as them. It was, I can't even put it into words. Like I'm sweating thinking about it. It was so cool.
That's so cool. All right. So now switching gears to the building side of things. Did I hear you mention, so you kind of got started with that just in the off season? Like you were making stuff just for your own place. Is that how you got?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that in the NFL, you have a ton of time in the off season. Like way too much time. And you only get paid during the season. So like you only work essentially on your paycheck for the duration of the season. So from, let's say roughly February through August, you're off. So a lot of people go home, but you have a lot of time. You're essentially going to work out on your own, and then you're going to do whatever you want with your time. So in that, I was living with a buddy of mine. I picked up the hobby of woodworking just on a whim. I wanted to build a workbench for the garage because I had some truck stuff that I was working on.
Okay.
I used to like to fiddle with my truck. And from that turned into a coffee table, which I built off of an Anna White plan. And that turned into people just checking out my stuff and enjoying it on a personal basis, like being in the house and literally seeing the coffee table. To one of my old teammates, he bought a house and didn't feel like buying furniture, and he was extremely creative and wanted to build some stuff. So him and I started dabbling and building things together, and that kind of morphed into me becoming a woodworker.
So when you did decide to hang up your cleats and like move past the football season, did you know building and furniture, like that was your next step? Like were you building towards that, or was it kind of this will be a good thing to pursue now?
Absolutely not. I had literally no clue what I was going to do with my life. I knew so getting a marketing degree, I knew I kind of wanted to be in sales or something that was more people oriented over number oriented instead of accounting or finance. So, I got linked up with an old teammate of mine, and we kind of used to vibe on a lot of stuff. He was an artist doing actual painting and some creative consulting, had a pretty good name for himself on social media. And, we started buzzing ideas around. We were hanging out a ton. I had some money. left over from playing, so I didn't have to rush into anything. Same with him. So we kind of just like fell into starting this business together. And I knew I always kind of wanted to do my own thing and be in business for myself. I didn't essentially know in what media or form that would be in. So from that, we started to do creative consulting and kind of like design and aesthetic, and it was all over the place. It was a terrible business. And but in that, I started picking up more like more woodworking type tools and started pursuing that a little bit more as a business. I'd been doing commission work on the side, and people were finding me on Facebook, and I was building out of his garage, another buddy's garage, and just kind of finding my footing when it came to making furniture. The business we started turned into doing creative consulting and design consultation. So I'd build a couple pieces of furniture, maybe a barn door, maybe a coffee table for a client, as well as we would help them, build their Twitter following or whatever that was at the time. So doing that, I really started to understand that I enjoyed bringing things to life, and like physically creating things with my hands. Like I touched on when I was a youth, I didn't realize that those skills would work, for me as an adult. So, that was probably, 2014 or so that I really started to sell and produce furniture, out of that business. And then from that, him and I parted ways, and then I really dove all in on selling and making furniture. And that's kind of where I was in the basement shop, that is in like my early YouTube videos. And I just started trying to sell as much furniture as I possibly could. I jumped on Instagram, and that's really where the whole ball started to get rolling with all this.
Has your aesthetic always been on the metal and wood side of things, that almost kind of the industrial feel? Like, have you always geared towards that in your builds?
So I'm like, I would say yes.
Okay.
I couldn't do it. Like I physically couldn't make the things that I make now. I didn't have the skills. But with that, I was always drawn to wood and metal as a pairing. I think it's a Pittsburgh thing, like very industrial town. There's wood and metal literally everywhere. And it's very raw in that, it's not like finding fine furniture in Pittsburgh is like, it's unheard of. Every building you go into, all of the like hotels and all of the skyscrapers and businesses and everything, it's very like raw materials. And I love that aesthetic. 5 years ago in Pittsburgh, rustic furniture was still super hot. And that was something that a lot of people were leaning towards. I was fortunate to get into furniture making with some friends who were doing home remodeling and giving me old wood. And then I eventually leaned towards starting to learn to do more welding and metal fabrication. And that ball started to roll there. I picked up Lincoln Electric as just friends of mine. The chief marketing officer being a fan of the Steelers, we talked on Twitter a little bit, and he sent me a helmet, and that relationship started. And once they started supporting me, I really started jumping in on becoming a better metal worker. And then I really started to develop, I think, the aesthetic that I'm kind of known for now with the industrial look. And that was being, me emphasizing learning the craft before, designing around it. Back then, though, I was building literally anything. I have craftsman style furniture, contemporary style furniture, modern stuff, whatever I could do to make a buck. And then I really started leaning my brand towards what I wanted to make, and that being a lot more of the industrial style.
Yeah. So was the content piece, has that always been something like you knew you were going to get into, especially coming from a marketing background, or did that come later?
That came much later. Like I had no clue that was going to happen. When I was in sports, you could really see the effect that social media could have on building an audience.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, Twitter back when I was playing was like the main focus of a lot of players. So being on there and seeing guys with 500,000 people that are listening to everything they say, whether they're getting in trouble or promoting other brands, like you could see the value in building an audience.
Yeah.
Once I started that business with my old teammate, he had a great Twitter following, and that was helping him sell a lot of the stuff we were selling with the business, gain a lot of attention. And it helped us gain a lot of press. Instagram just started getting hot back in 2013, 14, 15-ish. So I jumped on there to start promoting my work. And from that, I started to see a lot of people like Brad, for instance, who are having a ton of success on the platform, and they were getting free tools. And I was like, well, I love I love free tools. I'd love some free stuff. So I really started emphasizing growing an audience because I knew brands, you could garner their attention from it. And I knew I could get free tools and supplement my business without incurring the costs associated with buying new tools. And I'd be able to become a better woodworker and furniture maker from it. So that's kind of why I got into content.
Yeah, yeah. Were you familiar with the whole like content world, especially on the maker side of things, just all the other folks that are out there? Like how did you find out about all that?
Oh, like I literally got on Instagram. I started following woodworkers and my friends and whatnot. And after dabbling around for a while, I was learning everything I was learning on YouTube. Watching tons of The Wood Whisperer, lots of Jimmy DiResta, and those are like my two huge influences from the beginning. Jimmy also has a very industrial aesthetic. Does a lot of wood and metal projects. And then you learn the finer aspects of it was watching Spags and the Wood Whisperer stuff. So from there, I was picking up a ton of information. And that's kind of where I realized that there's a pretty solid community based around these quote unquote makers. But I didn't really care at the time about being part of that community. I wanted to win in Pittsburgh. Like I just wanted to be like the biggest woodworker in the city. Yeah. And specifically like on Instagram. So like that was my goal, was like develop a strong Instagram following. So when people were looking for furniture in Pittsburgh, they find me on Instagram and want to work with me. And that's kind of like, how things have progressed for the past couple of years, unintentionally, after realizing about this awesome community that we're all part of, and getting more and more involved with it. You start to see the benefits of being in the community and not being self-centered outside of it. Watching, being in the community, all the benefits that I wanted from the beginning came naturally as, I started to develop these relationships and friendships and started giving back by producing YouTube videos and trying to teach and coach and inspire and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were, especially making furniture, like full out, was it hard? Because like earlier you mentioned when you were playing football, a piece of that was just the culture and being around just that environment. And I imagine there was a lot of just solo late nights when you were building. Like, was that an adjustment for you? Did you like that? What was that like?
So I guess in retrospect, I can look back on it and say I liked and enjoyed the fulfillment of the community when doing things, because you are right. It was a lot of lonely nights, very late. Solo, evenings in that old basement shop I was in. I remember coming out of there at midnight and, you have no concept of what time of the day it is, but you've been engaging on Instagram and chatting it up with people. This is before stories and such. So, it was literally via text messages, or whomever you were speaking with. And in that, to get a couple hundred likes on a post after you worked your butt off all day long in a basement by yourself, huffing dust, it was gratifying. To see some sort of reward from all that solitude and all that time and effort you were putting in. Because as a lot of us know, as entrepreneurs and small business owners, it is a literal grind. Like it's not just a theoretic grind, like grind time and all these quotes and inspirational BS you see around. You literally have to put the time in order to get ahead in any way, if you want to win in life, and especially in business. So that's a lot of time in your own head. That's a lot of opportunity to either go crazy or to learn and educate yourself. So to get the fulfillment and I guess the type of gratitude that the community gives back to people putting out content, that was something that I enjoyed looking back on it, and I didn't even realize it at the time.
That's cool. All right, so we won't get into you growing either of your businesses, because you guys talk about that every week on Made for Profit. Yeah. But I would love to know. So you mentioned you started kind of pursuing Brad just because he was doing some really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, where did the idea of the podcast come from?
So Brad and I developed a friendship over like the past 3 or 4 years or so, just based around talking, kind of like this, Brad used to have a long commute to work, as he talks about on the show. And in that, he'd give me a call, once a week or so, and we catch up. What are you working on? What's going on? I actually jumped on YouTube before Brad. And if you guys know Brad, Brad's a shark. Like, if Brad's going to do something, he's going to win. And so when I got onto YouTube and I started to see a little bit of success, he and I started to be able to have conversations based around more of what was happening in the business. I was growing my Instagram following. He was already pretty much established as one of the early Instagram influencers in our space. And from there, we started bouncing around. Our conversations always turned towards the business side of things, how we were growing a following, what sponsors we were talking to, what kind of rates we were negotiating, what tools we were getting, where we were going, what the plans were, yada, yada, blah, blah. And from that, we went to our first show together, I want to say a little over a year ago. Like, we'd just been friends, and it was kind of like pen pals nowadays. You hop on a Skype call and you chat back and forth. But we had spitballed the idea of a podcast, and there's a lot of them in our space. But we wanted to do something that was different, that had directive towards what him and I were always talking about. And that would be the business side of things. So we went to, it was the Atlanta Woodworking Show, I want to say 2 years ago together. And we'd never met in person, but we book a room together. We show up, we're hanging out. And after a couple adult beverages and some late night Taco Bell tacos, him and I were sitting in the lobby, and we just looked at each other and we're like, screw it, dude, let's do it. Yeah. And that's where we just decided to go in on the concept for Made for Profit. Now, with knowing both of us, if you listen to our show, that took a lot of planning, and it took, after about 3 or 4 months, we actually launched the show. And now we are about a little over a year in, and couldn't be happier with the feedback we've gotten and where the show's going.
What surprised you the most? Like, thinking back to when you guys first launched a year ago, is there any like big unexpected things that have happened?
So there's a lot of unexpected things. One being the amount of work. There's a lot of shows that are just a casual conversation that there's not a lot of planning for. Like, I know for a fact you definitely went and watched my content, looked up my bio, and like did some research before we had this conversation. We've chatted briefly via email. Like, there's work that goes into a podcast, and you don't realize that when you're consuming them all the time. With the type of podcast that we put out there, we like didn't realize how much time and effort was going to have to go into coming up with subjects and planning and scheduling around. Brad's got a family. He's got 3 kids. He's also doing Fix This, Build That full time. At the time we started, he was still working a full-time job. Me, I was trying to sell and produce furniture as much as I could. Like, a lot of stuff goes into the back end and the background of what's happening for these podcasts that we're all putting out there. So that caught us off guard from the beginning. And I think that's why when you read statistics on podcasts, a lot of them fail early on. It's just because you don't realize how much goes into the back end of it. So that was something that caught us off guard. But on the other side of things that wasn't as so much a negative catch was the positive feedback we were getting from the community. We really realized that there's literally no resource for the business side of the maker community. It's very difficult for any of us to learn tactical and deliverable aspects of execution when it comes to anything in our business, whether it's properly pricing a piece that you want to sell or growing a targeted Instagram following in order to do content production or sell products. So we were extremely surprised to see how much people agreed with us and how much they thought, wow, there's nobody out there doing this kind of info specifically for makers. So that was a great part of getting that show off the ground and getting it started.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember, I think you guys hadn't, because a lot of those first episodes were on like building commissions and that kind of stuff. And I don't think you'd gotten quite to the content piece. I remember, I asked Brad, I was like, I know people talk about sponsors, they talk about plans. Like, where does like the majority of the money come from? He's like, man, it's totally sponsors. Like, that's where a lot of the income. I was like, yeah, no one's like saying that. Like, I couldn't find that anywhere. Just don't know how to tell me numbers. I just want to know like where's the biggest bang. But that thing has been a blast to listen to. What's funny is, especially when I learned more about both of you, I would imagine in high school you guys would have been a very like odd pairing.
Yes,
because you got Brad like super analytical. Like, I imagine he was a little more on the nerdy side, and then you played in the NFL, and so it's just, it's really funny pairing. But then I see you guys at like Workbench Con and stuff like that, and you guys are competing against the modern maker guys, and like it's just cool to see kind of people's backgrounds, and they all kind of come together.
Yeah, what's funny. What I think is funny about me and Brad is like, yes, there's a 10-year age gap, right? Brad's literally 10 years older than me. He's at a completely different stage in his life. His background experiences are completely different than mine. But what we can agree upon, and where we align a lot on, is like the grind. So there was a specific moment where like I literally felt like I was pestering Brad all the time. I'm like, dude, you got this new sponsor. Like, how did you get that? Like, how can I do something similar? Like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Like, I want to be coached. Like I thirst for it. Right. So if I find someone producing or doing things better than me at a higher level, I literally just like leech onto them, and I want to suck every bit of information I can get out of them in order to learn the best that I can, as well as I like thoroughly believe in giving back as much as I can too.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to like work this relationship and prove to this guy that I'm worthy of his time, because I'm looking at him as like a god in the Instagram community. And he just said to me at one point, he was just like, you know what? Like, you're going to put the work in. And he's like, that's way different than a lot of people that come in and like ask for advice. Cause there's a lot of people that just want to hear it and then they don't do anything about it. Right. But like Brad and I were having these conversations, and it was kind of like a coaching role for him at the time. Was he'd tell me something, then I'd go do it and I'd report back. And then he'd tell me something and I'd go do it and report back. And we kind of built this thing up. And then like, it didn't matter what time of day, 5 a.m, midnight, like Brad would call me and I'd be awake working. And like, that's where we aligned a ton. Cause like what you don't see from Brad a ton is how much time he devotes to not only his businesses and brands, but his family as well. And like, and he makes it all work and he balances it a ton. And we aligned greatly on those things. So from that, you're able to throw aside the fact that like, you know, I'm twice his body weight and I had this whole like NFL path while Brad was killing it in a standard, like business line of things. And from, you know, sitting back and looking at mine and his past, you know, Brad did wrestle and he was in sports when he was younger.
Yeah.
And even though I was much more successful as far as like what you see on paper in sports, we both had the same mindset. Like we both walked into the room and we were going to outwork everyone regardless of what our talents were. And we were going to control the things that we were going to control. And we were both going to maximize what our bodies could possibly give us. And now we're doing the same thing in life and with business. And that's kind of where him and I became like the yin and the yang, and we align a ton. And I think why Made for Profit is doing so well, and why him and I are able to have this like really cool and fun relationship that's also professional, and doing it on both sides of it too.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, I know we're getting close on time. One question I wanted to ask that kind of segues into a little bit what you mentioned about Brad balancing. We had a question come in from Johnny at JT Woodworks. He was asking how have you balanced commissions and content production? And then I know it seems like recently you're moving more away from that, right? More into the content piece.
Yeah. So I don't anymore. So like this is it's very, very difficult. So what you'll realize if you get into custom commission work is the fact that you almost give up creative control when it comes to whatever you're making based on what you're supposed to deliver on for the client. And in that, content is its own product per se. So with that, you got to look at producing a piece of content differently than producing content around something in general, for instance. So like a viral video is planned. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
You know, like Dude Perfect isn't just like playing around all day long and filming it. They're strategically planning each and every single thing that they're doing, and they're planning it around what their audience wants to see. So when it comes to balancing content creation and custom work, what I realized was producing content around custom work was boring. Yes, it can provide a lot of value and education, but there's so many better instructors and educators on YouTube that like that doesn't fit me. Right. So you know, with that, I've been grinding out both for the better part of my entire career as a maker, up until this year where I was like, you know, Brad and I had the conversation. I was just like, screw it. I put the hammer down and I hit up all my sponsors and was like, hey, I want to pursue content full time in 2018. This is what I need to be able to do it. I'd love to be working with the brands that I'm already working with, blah, blah, blah. We worked it out. We made the numbers work. And that's why I've been able to morph out of doing custom work, because my life doesn't depend on it anymore. Because what I was realizing was that it was very, very stressful to manage both. I mean, I'm on a computer for, as far as custom work goes, half the week just producing email conversations and drawings and renderings for clients. It takes all my time from being in the shop away. And in order to make money in doing that, you're now like running a production. So the profit margin is coming from the costs that you incur as far as paying yourself a wage, and you just go with like your fixed costs of materials and such. And with those, you now have overhead that goes into the business as far as I'm renting a space. I got to pay for lighting. I got to pay for equipment maintenance and all that, and all these factors. Well, you go after it and crush it for 3 years or so, is like I tried to do, and you don't see much growth, and you're wondering why. Well, one human being can only do so much.
Right.
And I'm not like all of a sudden going to become Sam Maloof and be able to charge you, $50,000 for a rocking chair.
Yeah.
So in order to make more margin, I need to scale the operation up, which incurs more costs. And now I'm battling the economies of scale and scaling a business. And with that comes more responsibility. Now I'm managing people, and I'm responsible for this supply chain, and all this stuff that's going into it. And I got to try to market and sell. So that, and then I'm trying to make content full time and put that out there. Like, it became very, very difficult. And I was literally incapable of balancing it. Before my assistant went and pursued a new job, I literally said to her, I was like, I'm done taking on custom work. Like, I can't do it. I told my girlfriend, I told my friends, I was like, I'm done. Like I have one opportunity to chase down this content creation with these sponsors that I'm working with right now and get ahead and build a real community around what I'm doing. I can always go back and sell custom furniture. Right. So with that, the balancing act kind of hit its breaking point and fell more towards content creation just because I see more upside there and much less stress. It allows me to be more creative as well. Like for instance, us having this conversation would probably not be possible if I was still doing custom work, because I'd be in the shop having to get a piece done for a deadline in order to make money. But I get to have a lot more creative control over what's going on in my life, and I'm not owned by a client or a deadline, which happens a lot in custom work.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, for people that are wanting to watch all of your future content that you're going to be making now, that you have more dedicated resources towards it, is it johnmalecki.com? Is that the best place to send people?
Yeah, you can get a hub for pretty much everything that I'm doing at my website, which is johnmalecki.com. And if you're an Instagrammer, that's going to be where you're going to see the most frequent amount of content coming out. And my Instagram handle is @John_Malecki. And
Made for Profit is madeforprofit.com too, right?
Yeah, Made for Profit is madeforprofit.com, as well as you can follow us on Instagram. If you're into like these kind of conversations that we're having right now, and you want to learn more about a business in the shop type stuff, definitely check it out. We have an amazing community over there. That's how we got to link up, and with that, we're seeing tons of amazing stories coming out. We're getting like pretty much every week now, someone's quitting their job and making a lot more money. And we've got products and all kinds of great stuff over there at Made for Profit to help everyone in this community become a little bit better as far as it comes with the business side of stuff.
Yeah, I've been loving it. It's a huge inspiration. So your story especially is so cool. So well, man, thank you so much for your time. It was a blast chatting.
Oh, Brandon, it's been a blast, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to seeing more and more individuals like yourself in person at Workbench Con and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And getting to see this community kind of get brought up together. It's podcasts like this that that are showcasing individuals like myself and Brad and all the other great creators around that are helping all of us bring up the maker community to get the recognition and whatnot that we deserve as far as content creators get. So I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man.